In 1980, the most powerful computer company on Earth built the machine that would define the next 40 years, the personal computer. Then, it made one small decision, a licensing detail nobody in the room thought mattered. It let a tiny outside company keep the rights to the operating system. That company was Microsoft. That detail handed away almost the entire value of the personal computer era. This is the IBM Microsoft DOS deal history, the story of how the smartest people in the industry gave away an empire for reasons that, at the time, sounded completely rational. To understand the decision, you have to understand how enormous IBM was. In 1980, International Business Machines was not merely a computer company. It was the computer company. It dominated the market for mainframes, the room-sized machines that ran the world's banks, governments, and large corporations, so completely that the saying went, "Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM." IBM's business was built on a specific idea of where value came from. Value came from the hardware, the expensive, sophisticated machines that IBM designed, manufactured, and leased. The software that ran on those machines was, in IBM's worldview, a supporting act. It was the thing that helped sell the hardware. This assumption was completely reasonable in the mainframe world. It was also about to be completely wrong in the world that was coming. By the late 1970s, a new kind of computer was appearing, the personal computer. Small companies like Apple and Commodore were selling machines that individuals could own. To IBM, this market looked small, chaotic, and beneath its dignity, a hobbyist toy, compared to its serious mainframe business. But it was growing fast, and IBM's leadership decided the company could not ignore it forever. So in 1980, IBM launched a crash project to build a personal computer of its own. And crucially, because the project had to move fast, far faster than IBM normally moved, the team was given permission to break IBM's own rules. The IBM personal computer was built by a small team in Boca Raton, Florida, deliberately kept separate from the rest of the company, so it could move quickly, and they made two decisions that would define the entire future of computing. The first decision was open architecture. Instead of designing every component in-house, as IBM traditionally did, the team used off-the-shelf parts from outside suppliers and published the technical specifications. This meant other companies could build add-on cards and accessories, and, as it turned out, could eventually build entire copies of the machine. The second decision was to buy the operating system from outside rather than write one, and for that, they went to a small company in the Pacific Northwest called Microsoft. In 1980, Microsoft was tiny, a few dozen people, led by Bill Gates and Paul Allen. It made programming tools, not operating systems. When IBM came asking for an operating system, Microsoft did not actually have one. So Microsoft did something audacious. It bought an existing operating system from another local company for a reported $75,000, adapted it, and delivered it to IBM as MS-DOS. Here is the moment everything turned. When Microsoft negotiated the deal, Gates insisted on a crucial term. Microsoft would license the operating system to IBM, but it would not sell it outright, and it retained the right to license the same operating system to other computer makers. IBM, focused on selling its hardware, agreed. To IBM, the operating system was a commodity, a necessary component. Why would it care who else used it? There is a companion tragedy here worth a sentence, because it sharpens the point. IBM had first approached a different company, Digital Research, run by Gary Kildall, whose operating system was the industry standard at the time. That deal fell through. Had it not, the story might have belonged to Kildall. Instead, it went to Microsoft, and to the clause that let Microsoft keep the rights. The IBM personal computer, launched in 1981, was an enormous success. IBM's reputation gave the whole category legitimacy overnight. Corporations that would never have bought a hobbyist computer bought an IBM. Within a couple of years, the IBM PC was the dominant standard, and IBM's own sales exceeded its most optimistic forecasts. For a moment, it looked like IBM had won the personal computer the same way it had won the mainframe. But the two decisions the Boca Raton team had made, open architecture and a non-exclusive operating system, were now working together in a way IBM had not fully anticipated. Because IBM had used off-the-shelf parts and published its specifications, other companies discovered they could build machines that did everything an IBM PC did. The one piece they legally could not copy, was IBM's startup software, but a company called Compaq famously reverse-engineered even that, legally, and in 1982 began selling a fully compatible IBM clone computer. Others followed, and every one of those clone makers needed an operating system. Where did they go? To Microsoft, the company that had retained the right to license MS-DOS to anyone. Suddenly, Microsoft was selling its operating system not just to IBM, but to IBM's competitors, all of whom were building machines that ran the same software. The operating system, not the hardware, had become the thing that every machine had in common. The operating system had become the standard, and Microsoft owned it. This was the signal IBM missed, and it was hiding in plain sight inside its own contract. In the mainframe world, whoever owned the hardware owned the customer. In the personal computer world that IBM had just created, the hardware was becoming a commodity, interchangeable, built by anyone, while the operating system was the thing that locked in users, attracted software developers, and defined the platform. IBM had given away the part that would appreciate and kept the part that would commoditize. As the clone market exploded through the 1980s, MS-DOS spread onto tens of millions of computers built by dozens of manufacturers. Every one of those installations sent money and, more importantly, power to Microsoft. Software developers wrote their programs to run on MS-DOS because that was what all the machines had in common. The more software that ran on MS-DOS, the more every buyer wanted an MS-DOS machine, and the more developers wrote for it. This is the self-reinforcing loop of a platform, and Microsoft sat at the center of it. IBM eventually understood the mistake and tried to reclaim control. In the late 1980s, it partnered with Microsoft on a new, more advanced operating system called OS/2, intended to be the future and, IBM hoped, to shift power back toward the hardware maker. But Microsoft was also developing its own graphical system, Windows, and when Windows succeeded, Microsoft had less and less reason to prioritize the joint project with IBM. The partnership fractured. Microsoft went its own way, with the platform the whole industry now depended on. The structural outcome was brutal for IBM. It now competed in the personal computer market against a swarm of clone makers, all selling essentially the same machine, driving prices and profits down. Meanwhile, Microsoft earned a fee on the operating system that ran on almost every one of those machines. IBM's and its competitors alike, without having to build any hardware at all. IBM was in the brutal, low-margin business of making commodity boxes. Microsoft was in the extraordinary, high-margin business of owning the standard they all ran on. The long arc is stark. Microsoft, the tiny company that had adapted a bought-in operating system in 1980, became by the late 1990s the most valuable company in the world. Its founder, the richest person on earth, wealth built substantially on owning the operating system standard that IBM had handed it. IBM, meanwhile, went through the most painful period in its history. In the early 1990s, it posted some of the largest corporate losses ever recorded to that point, and it restructured drastically. And in 2005, IBM did the thing that closes this story. It sold its personal computer business entirely to the Chinese company Lenovo. The company that built the personal computer, that gave the machine its name and its legitimacy, walked away from the business it had created, leaving the platform and the profits to Microsoft. IBM survived and thrived again by reinventing itself as a services and enterprise technology company, a very different business from the one it had been. It is still a major corporation today, but the personal computer, the machine it invented, made its fortune elsewhere. Every clause matters, and the clause that mattered most in the history of computing was the one about who could license the operating system. The easy lesson is that IBM made a dumb deal, that it should have insisted on owning the operating system, but that judgment imports knowledge IBM did not have. In 1980, in the entire history of computing up to that point, hardware was where the value lived. IBM's assumption was not stupid. It was the accumulated wisdom of the most successful computer company in the world, applied faithfully to a new market, where it happened to be exactly wrong. The real lesson is about the difference between the product and the platform. IBM was thinking about the product, the machine on the desk. Microsoft was thinking, whether by foresight or luck, about the platform, the standard that every machine would have to run. Owning the product gives you this sale. Owning the platform gives you every sale, from everyone, for as long as the platform lasts. This is what makes the story a sibling to Xerox. In both cases, a great company held the future in its hands. IBM literally built it and could not see which part of it was the treasure. Xerox saw the graphical interface as a research curiosity. IBM saw the operating system as a component. Both were looking directly at the most valuable thing in the room and mistaking it for a detail. So here is the question. When you are building something new, how do you know which part of it is the commodity and which part is the crown? Especially when everything you have ever learned tells you the crown is somewhere else. The comments are open. The essential accounts of this story are Paul Carroll's Big Blues and James Wallace and Jim Erickson's Hard Drive. All sources for this video are listed in the description below.